free stuff, free modules, free cables, free cassette tapes, free t-shirts, stickers, which are usually free, but you know, they're going to come along with all of this stuff. What am I talking about? A bunch of stuff that I am going to be passing on to my Patreon subscribers here in about a month or so. So if you are not signed up for the Patreon yet, you can head over to patreon.com/PodularModcast. And I've been talking about this for a while, but I think maybe it's time that I show you some of the stuff. So let's start with some cassettes. All right, the last 2 copies of Kitty Safari by me and my friend Stephen Jett. It is a bunch of really great piano playing by Stephen, run through my modular system. And then I got passed along a bunch of cassettes, and it turns out I own some of them already. I'm going to be passing these on. So I've got VCO ADSR, Serious Lies EP, Minor Truths EP. It looks like it's like maybe a split. Looks pretty cool. Heinbach, Dear Earth, Gemini Horror, Obsidic, Gerald Fjord Signals, great album. Ross Fish from Moffensief, 8 songs about absolutely nothing. I have this one, it's really good. I have this one as well, Fossilize Me, Era, Akil Adam, Hollow Moon, The Great Krell Machine from Flag Day Records. This one has, let's see, Walker Farrell, Todd Barton, a bunch of really cool people on it. This is a Tom Hall cassette. Tom Hall's great, Daedalus. And then I have this one as well. It's called Dry Bath. It's very weird, but I really, really like it. So there are the cassettes. I've got a bunch of stickers, a bunch of PodMod stickers, of course. And then I've got a bunch of blank panels from the Bleep Bloop 2000, which is now sold out, but I do have a bunch of extra panels. So if anybody wants some blanks with my big dumb face on it. Okay, so on to cables. I've got a whole bunch of right angle cables here. Various lengths, various color schemes. Got some glow in the dark, some that are not glow in the dark. I've got a whole bunch of these black and gold braided cables in various sizes. And then I've got some red stackables here. And I've also got this here tote bag full of various colors of tie-dyed Podular Modcast shirts. And then there are a few white ones as well. Sizes are limited. And then finally the modules. This is the part you've been waiting for. I've got an After Later Audio Filthy filter, an After Later Audio blend, which the only reason I'm getting rid of this is because I have more of them, and I think they're a very, very useful utility module. And then a nice, simple Envy from After Later Audio. These, it's just a nice little ADSR, and it's got an end of attack and end of rise trigger output, so pretty dang useful. So if you want to be on the receiving end of the announcement of when you can get this stuff, then you got to go over to patreon.com/PodularModcast and join up. I'm just going to randomly post what's there, and I'm going to make little packages, basically. It'll all be first come, first serve. So if you see that post, look at what's on there, and then claim it in the comments or send me a message, and then it's yours, and I will send it out to you. As you know, if you've been listening long enough, I could not do this show without your support on Patreon. So once again, patreon.com/PodularModcast, link in the show description. Hello and welcome back to Podular Modcast. My name is Tim Held. This week we have Daniel Miller and Gareth Jones back on the show to talk about their project Sunroof and the new Sunroof release, which comes out this Friday, the 17th, if you're listening week of release of the show. And what else? Oh, I got a new camera. What do you think of this double angle stuff? It's pretty cool. So hopefully demos will be a little bit more, professional looking and stuff. So the 9th, few days ago was my birthday, and I went out to a lake called Lake Crescent. I, of course, did a remote performance, so hopefully I'll get that edited and out soon. But this lake was so cold. It doesn't help that it's February and there was snow just a couple hundred feet up on the ridge above the lake. But I've been in some really, really cold rivers before, and in the late summer, early fall, and in early spring. So I thought that this was going to be no problem. And I just went and jumped straight off the dock because it just drops off instantly. It's super deep. And that was the closest I've had to having my breath completely taken away from me while submerged in cold water. Luckily, you swim to shore and 2 steps and you're in a sauna. And yeah, having a sauna there was very nice. So my wife Hannah and I and our friends went into the sauna a few nights later, and it was very cold outside and nighttime. But we went in, got super hot, and then went into the lake, and actually did that twice. And not quite as cold when you heat up your core so much. And I can't stress enough how good it feels for like the following hour after. You get super, super cold while you're in there. You come out, you get dried, you put on a nice hoodie and some big thick sweatpants and some gloves maybe and a beanie, and you just have this like warm glow for sometimes a couple hours, depends on how cold the water is and how long you're in it. But you don't come to Podular Modcast to talk about jumping in cold water. I feel like maybe I have talked about this entirely too long. This week's episode is brought to you by Patchworks, our lovely synth shop here in Seattle, the place where I got both of my 4MS powered pods. And after this weekend, I'm thinking I might want to get a third one. And you're like, well, why do that when you have a 7U case? And it's like, because I have the 7U case too. I want one to be like my guitar rig, like the interface that I get my guitar into my modular system, and some envelope following and some CV control with the guitar. Then I want one for effects, and then I want one for my samplers, which include the STS. I love this sampler. This is the second one I've owned, and I bought this at Patchworks. So if you would like to visit Patchworks online, please go to patchwerks.com, and they will solve all your synthesizer needs. And if you're kind of wondering what module or modules you should get, I highly, highly, highly recommend the shaped dual envelope VCA from 4MS. Of course, the stereo triggered sampler from 4MS. So once again, that's Patchworks, patchwerks.com. Also, thank you to 4MS. I'm really excited. I've got a few more 4MS modules coming in the mail this week, hopefully. I am getting the Swan, the spherical wavetable navigator, the DLD, the dual looping delay, and then also the mini peg, which is part of the 5 new modules that they've released lately. The shaped dual envelope VCA, like I just showed you, the new shuffling clock multiplier. Basically, that module has existed for a while, but there was an expansion or expander for it. Now the new one is just the expander and the old module in one. Link in the show description. Let's get into the show. And I'm joined once again by Gareth and Daniel from Sunroof. And I love that the new record, we won't want to jump right in, but I love that the new record is called Part 2, right? Or number 2? And this
Volume
is
2, yeah.
Volume 2. And this is the Volume 2 Sunroof Pod Mod, so it's quite timely. You guys were on in May of 2021, so we would still have been kind of in the area of the pandemic where not a lot of traveling and not a lot of live stuff's going on. So I'm kind of curious, like, since things have loosened up and the world's opened up a bit, have you guys been taking advantage of that as far as live shows or seeing shows or just traveling or?
Definitely traveling, being able to work together again, which is amazing because we weren't really able to work together because I'm based in Berlin and Gareth's in London. So
Hmm.
during lockdown, we were not able to work together. So that was a real drag, even though it certainly gave me more time with my modular because there
Hmm.
was nothing else to do after work. And yeah, I've been traveling around. I've seen a few gigs. We played one gig in November in Barcelona, which was great. And we've got some gigs coming up in the UK and Germany. So
Man, that's got to be exciting.
yeah,
How about you, Gareth? Have you been traveling? What's your? So I follow you on Instagram as well, and I see that you're still producing other people's records and still jamming with people and everything.
Yeah, I had a great experience last year. I co-wrote a record with a friend, Emily Tierson. Her
Hmm.
project's called Cankeys, which Mute picked up on actually, and we did. She invited me to join her on tour, so I've never really done a proper tour before. I think I went out with Tuxedo Moon as a sound person in about 1981 or something in Europe. But this was like 5 weeks on a nightliner bus all around Europe. It was a fantastic crew of people. We were supporting Jan Tiersen, who I've also produced records for and
Hmm.
with. And there was a great crowds and it was a wonderful atmosphere. It was a huge learning experience for me, just seeing really what it's truly like life on the road. You know, so many
Yeah,
of my colleagues have done it and I'd never done it. So that was a great piece of traveling that I was able to enjoy in
awesome.
the end of last year, October, I think.
Okay, yeah, I think I must have saw them on their the U.S. leg of that same tour because I saw
Okay.
Jan and she's I'm sorry, I forgot her first name.
Emily.
Emily. She
Emily.
sings on a few songs with Jan when he's performing, right?
Yeah.
Amazing show. That was so awesome. It was actually at my favorite venue in Seattle. It's called the Neptune, and it's got this little balcony seat off to the side on the second tier where it feels like you're in your own little private area. And me and my wife took advantage of that. So we were, just looking right down on the show, and it was absolutely fantastic. And I had Jan on the show a little before that, and lovely guy.
Oh,
Yeah, he's a
yeah.
super talented man of many skills
It's
musically.
he's one of those people that you kind of watch and you're like, why do I do this? You know, but at
Well,
the same
hey,
time,
Tim, it's not a competition, right?
that's right. Yeah, I think I finally hit the age where that kind of thing is more of a source of inspiration than it is something to make. We have plenty of things that we can make ourselves feel bad about in life. Most of them aren't real, so I might as well look
Yeah,
for the good stuff, right?
absolutely. Yeah, I think if I was if I felt I was in competition with all the wonderful electronic artists who are in the deep end, whereas I'm paddling around in the shallow end, I would never leave the house.
Right.
But
you know, that actually that kind of hits on something I've been thinking about lately. Um, I think I'll try not to make this too much of a therapy session, or else, and if it gets too far, let me know, and you guys can send me a bill. But um, I'm thinking to myself, I'm going on 5 years of doing the show, and I've been doing modular for just over 5 years, and I hear these modular albums by these super talented people, and I'm just like, I could never do this with a modular synthesizer. And I could feel myself starting to feel a little bit bad about it. And then I kind of had to stop and be like, how often do you try to do this kind of thing? This is their thing. This is what they're good at. You're doing your thing, just keep doing your thing. Um, so yeah, I think that's just kind of like something we need to remind ourselves every once in a while that it isn't a competition, and and seeing somebody who you view as better as you, like be grateful for that and use that as fuel for your own creative endeavors. So there's my little preach soapbox corner, and then now we can get back to your guys' album and tour.
Yeah, but then whatever you do, and whatever you do is your expression that he or she who you admire wouldn't be able to do. That's what, that's the most important thing to remember. They might be
Hmm.
able to express themselves in a very skillful and technically, good way, but they would never be able to express what you want to express. So, however skilled or not you are, you're transmitting your expression through the work that you do. I think that's really important to remember.
Yeah, and go ahead, Gareth.
Well, just individual voices, I mean, the collaborative voice in the case of Sunroof, obviously, but and all collaborations. But yeah, it's such an encouragement that I feel once you realize, oh, actually, that this is quite unique. I think what we all do in our own way is unique and special, and has a place in the infinite cosmos. Clearly.
I agree. Yeah.
Hey, have you read Rick Rubin's book?
No, I'm not
Rick
sure.
Rubin's he's just bought a book out about creativity. It's a good read. I mean, obviously,
a podcast that people are really yammering on about. Have you checked that out?
Yeah, no, but I've seen him. Obviously, he's got a book out, so he's promoting it. He knows what he's doing,
Yeah.
But he's a bit of a Zen master, isn't he? I don't know the man personally, but I've enjoyed reading his book anyway. I recommend it.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll put that on the reading list. I think also something that is really important in this vein is kind of to hit back on what you said a minute ago, Daniel, is like, actually you guys both said it, and I think it's an important way to look at it is your voice, your expressive voice. And I'm not talking about your oscillators, what it is that's coming out. And I think it's much more important for people who are trying to make music that, they want to be associated with their name and they want people to listen to hunt, maybe, well, not hunt for that voice, but follow that, and just, be true to that voice. Because if you spend your time trying to be Aphex Twin, you're not at all sharpening your own skills and building your voice up, so that's our,
And there's no point, because Aphex Twin already exists. So why be a second Aphex Twin?
That's exactly right. Yeah. And I don't know if there could be a second Aphex Twin.
Yeah.
That's just, he's just off in his own world there. So I've been listening to the new record. It's great morning setting up the studio music, I'll tell you that. And reading the liner notes, I think it's funny. One of you guys were quoted as, well, the first album we had 40 years to make it. This one we took 9 months to make it. So I definitely want to talk about this, the difference between the approach and then like the feel and even the voice of this, because it still sounds like you guys to me. Again, like I hear Sunroof's voice.
Well, that's good.
I don't know if this is true or not, but it feels a little moodier, a little darker to me, which I like. But maybe that's not accurate. But I don't know. To me, it feels like a really good horror film score in a couple moments. So yeah.
Right.
I mean, I think
a nice flow to it.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, we didn't really talk about the album too much before we started recording, but the only thing we thought really was that the first album was quite dense in terms of sound, and we thought, let's try and do something a bit more stripped back this time. I don't know if that comes across or not.
But
that was really the only.
Yeah, that might be what I was picking up on, that darker, because it has more room for these reverb tails and stuff to kind of do their thing. Maybe that,
Yeah. I mean, that's really the only thing we talked about before we. That's really the only thing we talked about before we started. I think we just carried. Well, no, that was pretty much it. And then it was a very similar kind of process to the kind of the rules that we made on the last record. I think we were slightly more flexible on the rules, but really the same principles behind it. Shorter track.
One interesting difference was that on the first record, on Volume 1, ongoing series, on Volume 1, we tried, and I think we managed to do each piece in a different physical space. But I think on Volume 2, we worked exclusively in your studio and my studio, Daniel, didn't we?
Yeah,
I think
that's correct. Yeah.
we didn't go to the Mute studio. We didn't go to Strong Room Studios. We just worked in our own spaces, which also clearly changes the atmosphere, because where we work changes the vibe, right? So
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Well, that was going to be one of my questions is how you guys did that. But yeah, as far as the vibe and stuff, do you feel that there's more pressure in a studio that's not in your home, or do you feel like maybe that's a good kind of pressure that can bring something else out of you, or like how does that vibe change affect? I mean, there's no really way to quantify that, but like just from your experience.
I didn't feel any pressure working in other studios. I mean, one of the studios we worked with was the Mute studio.
Right.
Um, no, I think the whole idea of this project for us is no pressure.
yeah,
Just yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I agree with that. Of course, Tim, it's very simple. It's it's stereo out from one case and stereo out from the other case. They're all essentially 4-track recordings. So it's not like there's
Okay.
the pressure of going to some studio and having a big setup with an engine. It's not like that. It's just when we worked in other studios, we just borrowed a favor from whoever was owning or managing that studio, and we just turned it. It was more subtle. It was to have a different physical space,
Right.
rather than a different. It's not like a band going and setting up somewhere. It's a very simple recording process.
Yeah, that was going to be my other question about like what I guess what kind other than the vibe change it sounds like, but what would be the real point of going to a studio when you guys both have perfectly functional ones, especially well, I guess here's my question. Are you using the acoustics of the room to set up your feels? Are you guys, are you doing like your pre-recording mixing and everything in headphones before you commit it to tape?
Well, no, we listen to it through speakers, and we arrive at the session unpatched, and we don't talk about really what we're going to do. We just start patching, listening to what each other's doing as we're patching, and then at a certain point, it feels right to press record, and and then we improvise around those patches that we've created.
Okay.
Yeah.
So given a day of recording, how many I mean, I'm sure it varies, but how many patches do you think that you're getting to a point where you're ready to record a couple takes of it or a really long take of it? And then after that, how much, like cutting up and picking out the good bits of each take do you do?
Well, in a day, most of our sessions are half a day or a few hours, which is part of the idea. I mean, we'll do a patch, and once we're happy, we'll record that, and maybe we'll do a few takes of that patch, and they could be very different versions of the same, using the same patch. And then if we have time, we might do a second patch. That hardly ever happens, does it, Gareth? Because we don't really, our time is limited, really. So we just focus on getting a good patch, 2 good patches, and working on those and doing a few takes of those. And we try to record, we want to make, we do short takes. They're relatively short takes, 5 to 7, 8 minutes on this album. So we don't want to start editing, really. We want to capture the flow of the improvisation, and we don't want to spend a lot of time for, choosing the so-called best bits. It's hard to know what a best bit is.
Right.
It's more about like listening to what we've done and saying, yeah, that's a good take, rather than that bit's good, or let's use that. I mean, that's the general way we work, is like as little editing as possible. A bit of post-production, that Gareth does, a bit of compression or EQ or all those things that happen. But that's the process, really.
That sounds, I mean, because you answered one of my next questions, but I want to kind of have you guys expound upon that, because every single time I've jammed with somebody else, especially in the world of like modular or anything, it's an hour can go by and you're like, we just recorded an hour of that. Like, what am I going to do with an hour of what we just did? So to have the restraint and the presence of mind to kind of keep that, like, is that a challenge? Or like, you also have been working together for quite a while. So like, do you guys just kind of have that down by this point?
Well, we've kind of learned by bitter experience, because we did our long improvisation sessions in the 90s, and we never were able to find the inspiration or the energy or the time to edit them down into listenable pieces.
That's the thing.
So we kind of learned from hard experience. So now we've embraced this shorter limitation. The manifesto is all about not getting stuck in days of editing. You see, we love improvising, we love patching, and we love improvising. We're not that keen on editing, to be honest. so especially on our own work, commissioned editing is different, obviously. So that quite early on we were like, no, we don't. If we have to do big edits, we're never going to do them.
That's so true. I have
this
so
is
many
why
hours of recording that I know I'm never going to revisit.
We can only recommend the idea of trying to force yourself to work in a 5 to 10 minute time frame. It works for us anyway, Tim. It's definitely worked for us.
That's funny. I've just kind of been doing something similar. Go ahead.
Great. I just want to, even actually, we're obviously working on volume 3 at the moment, and we had a little bit of an insight, I think, a couple of sessions ago, where we did 2 takes of the same patch, and they both had a lot to love in them, and we almost thought, and this is yet to be decided, but it felt like there was almost no point in doing 2 takes of the same patch, because then you're just stuck with having to choose between them. So because there were the last little session we did, we were very time constrained, but we just did 1 take of the 1 patch, and we were both delighted with it. It just it's starting to feel like 1 take of a patch is enough, because otherwise, if you do multiple takes, you're just faced with the dilemma of trying to choose between them, and you might as well say, well, either that patch works, that flow works, or it doesn't, and we'll make another patch.
Totally. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I also, when you have 2 different, brains listening for quote unquote best, Daniel could take 2 more than 1, and it could be opposite for you, Gareth. So like, you're kind of I'm sure you guys have a really good system of working through, disagreements, because no musical collaboration can last more than a year without that. But you don't have to. You're saving yourself some pain and sorrow, it sounds like, and that the part of it that takes the joy out of the whole thing too. Is that it sounds like for you guys, it's like the hunting and editing. I'm also I'm curious about how, like, when you're setting this up. So you say, like, you guys kind of you get to a point where you feel like it's ready to do a take. How long is that process? What is the communication like in that? And then do you do kind of, when you get to the point where you're like, I think we're there, do you kind of jam for a few more minutes before you hit record?
Well, I would say, I couldn't say how long it takes us to get the patch, but usually maybe an hour or so, roughly, something like that. We don't really talk to each other at all. It's just about listening to what we're doing, and then there's a moment where it just feels right, and Gareth or I'll say, should we put this one down? And then we do. I mean, it's
okay. Something happens, you both look at each other and you're like, okay, we're done. Like, you get that, like, kind of bright-eyed, like, woohoo, we got it.
Yeah. I don't know how woohoo it is, but it's it's more of a, I think that sounds okay, let's record it.
Yeah. It doesn't sound too bad.
Sound too bad.
Exactly. I think we might have just found a cultural difference between our 2 sides of the pond. You get a little more
Sure.
I think
reserved with the
we're very
rules.
English on that.
Yeah. It's
There's
not.
no high fives going on really. No awesome dudes or anything like
You
that.
guys aren't giving a hang loose sign to each other, and that's the sign to
Yeah,
record.
exactly.
We do actually, to get back to the technicalities you were alluding to, when we do, so we feel there's a vibe in the room or whatever, and we don't want to waste it, so let's record it. And at that point, we might take 5 or 10 minutes to how do we start is often about all that's explained, all that's discussed. I mean, there's, as Daniel said, there's very little talking, but then there will be like because quite often the vibe hangs in the room, but there might be several things happening at once. So we have a quick kind of reboot, and we think, well, okay, what are we going to start with? And then we quickly strip back to something, either one element or two, whatever. There's millions of options, but we definitely there's a little pause for thought, isn't there, D? When we just go, okay, how are we going to start? And that's it then, and then we go.
Okay. And
That's right.
I probably asked this question last time, but I'm curious how you do it on this round. But are you guys like, how much syncing of systems are you doing between your two systems? Are you sharing a clock? Are you sharing some effects, or is it kind of like, you're here, and just go?
Clock.
Okay.
Yeah,
Always.
I just send Gareth a clock, and that's it.
Yeah.
Although, go on.
Go on. Go on, Gareth.
Well, we've had a phase, and to be honest, I can't really, I can't decode the pieces on volume 2, so I hardly know what Daniel did, and I don't really know what Daniel did and what I did on the record anymore, which is great, which is one of the things we love about it. But we've definitely had a period of sessions where I've been exclusively sampling what Daniel does. So I've not been, if you like, creating any original sound. I've been taking snippets. So in addition to clock, I think for a while Daniel was using a Bifaco mixer that's got a aux send on it, 3 aux sends, and one of those aux sends was dedicated to a line coming to my samplers.
Okay, great.
So I was taking audio from his mixer, which sometimes was very considered, and I'd worked out what sound might be behind which aux send, and I kind of knew what I was sampling. And sometimes it was totally unexpected. I thought I was sampling one thing but got something else, with all the randomness and chaos of modular joy that we all love. So that's been super interesting, actually, because it's not solved. It's been an interesting way to approach tonality, because we're not that big on, as you know, if you've heard some of the tunes, we're not that big on tuning up and playing melodies. But when if I'm using a loopad or a loop sampler of some kind to take fragments of what Daniel's doing, it kind of pitch wise it fits, in a good way, because I might only go up an octave, up or down an octave. I'm not transposing in semitones or anything. So that's given a real musical connection somehow, where this allowed us to overcome one of our challenges about what key are we playing in, or do we have to tune up our oscillators, and then as soon as we do some cross modulation, the pitch has gone somewhere else anyway. So that's been very profound and very deep. It's a channel a furrow we're still plowing.
Right. Well, that's a lot of what I do is kind of sampling myself during. I don't do a lot of live performances lately, but I do a lot of these what I call remote performances, where I go out and I just perform somewhat like I build a patch at home and get it to a point where I'm like, okay, I can make this work out in the field. So it's a mixture of improv and preparation. But I use Morphogene's been the primary thing that I do live sampling with. But I just got the Qubit Nebulae, which there's some overlap with Morphogene, but it's definitely its own thing. And I've had the Lubad and the what the other one that they do that's really awesome. What is that one called with the crazy light panel? Why am I Arbar?
Okay, Arbar. That I haven't
Yeah.
got one of that. That looks amazing, doesn't it? The light panel alone.
That thing's crazy. If you like the workflow you just described, I think you would have some fun with that. But other than Lubad, what are you using for that kind of live sampling?
I've got the Bitbox Micro,
Okay.
which I'm using with Ableton Clip style, if you like.
Yeah.
It was that was very fruitful for a while, because I think in an earlier firmware version, the loop didn't always consistently play in time.
Oh boy.
So there was like phasing offsets. If which became part of what we were doing live, which was a lot of fun. And then I got just a 2 HP sampler, very simple looper that I just trigger with a gate, and you take a certain number of pulses and then hit it again, and then I've locked in a 7-beat loop or a 3-beat or whatever,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So those are the big, and the Morphogene, of course.
Yeah, Morphogene is one of the greatest pieces of musical technology I think I've ever touched. I love that thing. So Daniel, while we're on the subject of gear and we're nerding out on gear, what are some of the all stars of, like, if you're packing up your kit to head over to Gareth's, like, what are the ones that just never stay behind?
The 512 Vector 512 sequencer.
Okay.
That's ever present, because it's like. And then, I mean, I'm trying to think. Well, I like the further generator, endorphins, further generator, a natural gate, which I got recently, which is fantastic sound.
I've heard good things.
I'm also right now, I'm quite into the Bastel Pizza.
Oh yeah.
Oscillator, and the Bastel Icary stereo filter. They work. That's really great. The Clavis Twin Waves, which there's a lot of power in a very small footprint, which is very useful. It's 2 oscillators, which can be LFOs and lots of different waveforms. Right now, I've also got I'm just looking actually. I've got the random source resonant equalizer,
Mm-hmm.
which is an equalizer, but it's got feedback, and you can actually play it as its own instrument.
Oh, cool.
It's a surge design, and that's really cool. The Clavis Quadigy for envelope generators that can also loop. That's usually in my setup. Wogglebug's always there. As much random stuff as I can muster.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, there's generally, but I've just changed. It's interesting. I would talk about this because I recently just dug out some of my older modules and put them into the rack, and I found it. I looked at it. I thought, wow, this is just like a completely new instrument now. So and that's been very inspiring. I think changing modules around is also a really important part of the process.
I do it constantly, maybe too much, but
yeah.
It's
a pain in the ass sometimes.
It is a total pain in the ass. I've actually, I don't know if you could see these. I got these 2 little 4MS powered pods. I like with this big Needham case behind me. It's great when I'm working in studio and just want to like have all my options available. But I find myself a little bit paralyzed. It's almost like when you're going through Netflix or Spotify or something like that and trying to decide what to watch or listen to. There's so much stuff that you spend more time kind of, browsing, I guess, your
searching.
modules.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I like to set up
Yeah.
kind of mini systems for myself and
Mm.
see how far I can get with those. That's
Mm.
and I think it just makes you a bet, like especially with somebody with I think I have, you know, there's probably no real answer to this, but generally I probably have too many modules for somebody at my experience level. So I find that breaking them down into smaller systems allows me to actually hone in on the
Mm.
specific instrument that I'm trying to build or the module that I'm trying to learn. Um,
Yeah, yeah, those are very good. My sequencer is in one of those pods, and my
yeah.
Bifaco mixer, which is something else that I always carry with me, is in one of those pods. And I have this other sequencer, which I'm still getting my head around, which is more like a trigger sequencer called the Flux. It's
Okay.
pretty complex and deep. I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
you're familiar with it, but
I'm not.
there's not much about it. It's made in Belfast, but it's unique in what it can do. No question about that.
Okay.
It uses this kind of envelopes to control the trigger speeds and things like that. You can get some very
Oh wow.
strange rhythmic things out of it. Sometimes it's total chaos and there's tons of parameters. But
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I'm getting my head around it. So there's a lot to learn about it.
Well, and I think, you know, there's I've heard everything across the spectrum of talking about gear and you know, gear doesn't make the artist, but there is a level of there's definitely a an inspirational well within gear that you're interested in, or you know, that's kind of new to you. I find that I end up making a lot of really cool stuff by accident with new things, and then I have to figure out how I got it to do that. But then when I'm done, I've got a new synthesis technique, you know. So and that happens with modules that
Mm.
I got a while ago and then didn't really understand or
Mm.
didn't spend the time with, and then, you know, like you said, dig them out and find it really inspiring. So I think that's, while it is a pain in the ass to be switching your system around all the time, it is a good way to kind of
Mm.
keep my creative juices flowing anyways.
And I also think the kind of innocence or whatever, naivety of when you get a new module is
Mm,
really exciting as well. I mean,
definitely.
talking
Hmm.
of like, how do I get that sound back? I just got the Chaos XOAC device's
Yeah. Hmm.
frequency shifter, which
Okay.
is fantastic. And I was trying it out in Schneidersladen in Berlin, great modular, you know, headquarters. I
Hmm.
was getting some crazy things out of it. I was just randomly plugging stuff in. Then when I got it home, I thought, how do I get those sounds back? You know, because they, you know, but it's another really good, really nice module as well.
Chaos makes some amazing stuff. That the
Mm.
Kameniac phaser. I didn't think I was a big phaser fan until I played with this thing. It's just insane. I love that thing. And I also have, I don't know if you guys know about this, and do you guys do much with like mid side processing?
I do acoustically, not in modular so much.
Okay, because Chaos makes this thing called the Minsk, um, and it's basically just a little mid-side thing with a couple different options, and you can
Mm.
set it up. It's good, I think, for people maybe who are recording in stereo and can want to maybe ensure that they're not getting any phase
Yeah,
cancellation or something
I
like that.
used this. What's the company called? Oh God, terrible. But they did that something like that, a small module,
Oh, is it
and it's
Warn?
stereofies.
Warn
Sorry,
Electronics? Warn? Or it looks like
no, I
it's
don't think
wrong.
so.
Okay, because I know they do a lot of
Wrong. Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
with.
Sorry. Yeah, that's it. Wrong. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I use that, like, for instance, to stereofy my mono spring reverb,
Yeah, you can do that
for
with this as
instance.
well. That's yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
while we're talking about modules, I just want to just throw a plug up here for Daniel and FSS, because this macro here is one of the coolest modules I've found for live performance. And I think you sent me this after our discussion last time. So do you want to
I
kind
think
of
so.
give
Yeah.
do you want to give your like your elevator pitch on like where the idea came from, why, and you know, how you executed it with FSS?
Yeah, well, the idea was, how do I control, especially for live situations. It wasn't just me; it was other people. Modular synthesis who were like, I saw interviews, they'd say, I want to change a lot of things at once. I don't have to run around the whole system. So, and I want to be able to do that as well. So, uh, I had a contact to Finley Shakespeare from Future Sound Systems via Chris Carter because they worked together on the Gristleizer, and we just had a chat. And we got on well. And I said, how can we do this? It'd be really great. And he said, yeah, that would be super useful. And basically, it's six. It's got one knob, and it's got 6 outputs, and each output, you send a voltage. What do you call it? I always forget what it's called.
You got it bipolar, unipolar switch for the big knob, and then each got a attenuverter.
Yeah, each one's got an attenuverter, bipolar, attenuverter, and so as you turn the knob, you're sending voltages out through those 6 outputs in different, at different strengths. So, for instance, in a classic kind of techno kind of world, you could be opening up the filter, opening up the send to a reverb, controlling a modulation via a VCA, all at the same time for big kind of sweepy things. But also, what I use it actually more. I might have maybe, say all 6 outputs going, and making very slight changes to things. And you make a slight change on the main knob, and the whole sound changes. And it's just a really, really nice way to work. And very practical for live and in the studio as well.
Yeah. So I actually found a new way to use it the other day, and it's so. Do you know the stereo triggered sampler by 4MS? It's really it's simple, but it's one of my favorite samplers. So basically, it's just like you got 2 sides that are kind of identical but can be separately controlled. So I load up little snippets of maybe one like piece that I did on a like on my Summit or something. But you can move your start and end times, and then that kind of changes your loop. So what I like to do is kind of send 2 of the outputs to the start and end time of one, and then 2 more to the other, and then just spend some time dialing in on the attenuverters where I want those loops to change. And you can kind of get these really cool just evolving loops that change when you tell them to. It takes a minute to dial that in because it's hard to get a precise start and end time on the sampler. But yeah, it's just there's a million applications for it.
What's it called, that sampler, Tim?
The stereo triggered sampler.
See, that sounds a bit like the S612, Daniel.
Yeah,
it's great.
Sorry,
I love it.
I've got this idea. I'm actually, it's not a secret because there's nothing to be secret about. But I'm talking to a few. There's this the very first Akai sampler that came out in the 80s before the S900 and S1000s, which became the classic. They did one called the 612, and it was very simple. And one of the things, it had like 2 sliders, one for start, one for end. And you could play the sliders, like really play the sliders to get this kind of almost granular, and just change the loop lengths. And it was very instant. You just shove something in there and start playing around. And I'm trying to get
very much like this.
Finley see what I miss. I don't want to go off on the track here, but there are lots of great samplers. Like the one that Gareth's got, the one, the micro, what's it called?
The Bitbox.
The Bitbox micro. But they're big. and they have a lot of. You can do a lot with it. What I'd like to have is something much smaller, real-time sampling with some few basic controls on it. For me, that would be great. And there are small sample players, but you can't record in real time. You have to, you have to load the SD card. I'd love to get something like that.
You can
I
record
can't find one.
I'll rack my brain about that and see, because I'm sure it exists, but I can't think of one now. But I'll forward you along if I find one.
I don't think you will, because I've really looked around.
Well, now it's out in the world, so somebody make it. You can
please.
record into this one, but it's not really. I wouldn't say the flow of recording into the STS is all that great for live sampling and then replaying. It certainly could be done. But what's cool is with the start and end position, basically, if you reverse those, if you turn, start all the way up and length all the way down, you can get into some really funky granular stuff. And then there's, of course, pitch for one. So yeah, it's a pretty good one. And then since we're on the gear topic, sorry, Gareth, I kind of got on Daniel on a roll with his modules.
No, I'm interested. I'm reading about the stereo triggered sampler as we speak.
Right on. And then the Stum, is that how you say that? Is that how you pronounce that?
Stum.
Another simple but elegantly designed, switch with grouping. My question, though, is I see some expander headers here. Are we getting expanders for this anytime soon? Or?
Well, they were talking about it, and then the pandemic happened.
Yeah.
So I'm not actually sure. I'm seeing we're playing in Bristol, where Future Sound Systems is based, on a show that Finley Shakespeare is actually promoting. So I'll definitely get on to him about that.
Okay.
When I see him, I'll let you know.
Okay. Yeah, I need to get Finley on the show. Anyways, I don't.
I
think maybe we've talked, and it's hard to keep track of the booking and stuff. But yeah, I love. Actually, that was a big inspiration for me. Like having you just think of an idea and then bring it to somebody, and and I think that's happening more. Like Andrew Huang now has a module out, and DivKid has had a couple come out with Instro and Bafaco. And it's, good ideas can come from people who aren't, electrical engineers or circuit designers. And I think it's cool to see this.
I'm certainly not.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah. But it's cool to see these, a pathway for people who have needs within their live or studio cases, and then can kind of spend some time, thinking about what exactly they'd want it to be, and then proposing it to somebody else and then having it come into reality. Like that had to be a good feeling when those arrived for the first time and you saw those, finished modules.
Yeah, it's a bit like getting if you make a vinyl album, it's like getting the album, getting the final thing in your hands.
So speaking of albums, that was Gear Corner. We'll switch to to Live Tour Corner. But as far as the tour goes and the live performance, when you got with your process in creating albums, being improvised, not a lot of editing, how do you prepare for live shows? Do you try to I know you're not going to recreate anything from the album. I mean, maybe you are, but do you try to find a vibe within the album, or try to do the same vibe of the album when you're doing a live tour?
No, not so far. I mean, in fact, we have a small 4-date European tour coming up. But we've only done one-off gigs before, but we certainly have not so far ever considered the recorded work when we've thought about live. We approach it not similarly perhaps to the recorded work, because we meet for a rehearsal. I mean, I'm personally a bit too scared, unless I would be up for it if it was like a 6-hour gig, or to start with the unpatched modular. But
Right,
for
yeah.
a 45-minute gig, I'm too scared to start with an unpatched modular. So what we do is we have a rehearsal the day before, and we build some patches. We might have a rehearsal with nothing patched in, and so we create a patch for the performance essentially. And
Okay.
so far, the live show's been nothing like the rehearsal.
And nothing like the album.
So, okay, so is this like a thing where you rehearse, you get this patch set up, and then you leave that patch patched for the tour, or is this like you show up as you go on? Are you going to get to sound check and then maybe switch some things up or start over if you have time? Or
Well, but as this is the first kind of time we've ever done kind of consecutive dates, we'll probably have a patch that we'll start off with. We'll have this rehearsal. It's not even really a rehearsal. It's more like just making a patch and playing around with it a bit. And then we discussed this the other day, and then we'll keep that patch for the other dates. But as we go on, I'm sure we'll be tempted to modify them in some way or other, but not necessarily change them radically.
well, and I imagine too that would be like I could see you hitting a sweet spot by like gig 3 where maybe you're flying a little looser and having a little more fun with it because you've just it's you're retreading that ground. And I almost wonder if at the end of it, if y'all should get in the studio and record, pretend you're playing one last live show, but do it in the studio, and you could treat your tour as the rehearsals for the album.
Yeah, that's like making an old school record, isn't it? Like in
Yeah.
the 60s, the band go on tour. But actually, of course, we will be. I've been struggling with this, and there's such a simple solution to it. So I've been wondering how to record, 2 stereo outs in very limited technical facilities that we have when we play live. But both of our racks have got headphone outs, so it's really easy to send the main outs to the PA or the whatever to the front of house, and then just take the headphone outs into a Zoom. So
Yeah.
hopefully, I'm planning on recording all 4 gigs, and hopefully there'll be something there worth releasing on Bandcamp. Perhaps we'll just do it on the Mute Bandcamp. We don't know. But I think it's important. I love documenting stuff. I think it's important, especially when it's improvised. You just never know,
Yeah, you could really, totally.
I did a little gig in a pub at the end of last year as my solo project, Electrogenetic, and I was so pleased that the sound guy recorded it for me on like a 4-track thing, and I did a little bit of mixing and a tiny bit of editing afterwards. And I was delighted to be able to share it with people, So
that's
awesome.
I
definitely wanted to. Sunroof are definitely going to be recording the 4 gigs,
right?
And
so,
and
go ahead.
Well, and the production rehearsal. I hope, every time we meet, stuff happens. Yeah,
right. So I mean, no shade on Zoom because I had a Zoom field recorder for a long time and really loved it. But I recently got this Tascam Portacapture 8, and it has 32-bit float, so you can't clip your recordings. So I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you can. Yeah.
I mean, even better. Even better. Yeah. What a huge dynamic. Yeah. I guess I hopefully will be fairly disciplined about not slamming the level into the Zoom. But anyway, that's what we're using. We're using what we've got. We're using the tools we've got at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, I love those Zoom record. I love field recording in general, but that's a whole other can of worms. So when does this tour start? I know. So if the listeners listening to this, day of release, the album comes out this coming Friday. When does the tour start, and where will you be?
We on the 9th of April, no, 7th of April. We'll be in Bristol. Yeah, we'll be in Bristol.
Okay.
What's the name of the club, Gareth? Can you remember?
No, I don't. But we'll be
put links,
Finley.
I'll put links to all the shows in the show description.
Yeah. Finley Shakespeare, who's putting the show on for us, he has
Oh,
a
cool.
regular night there.
Oh, nice. Very
And
cool.
then we're playing in London on the 10th at a really nice place we played before called Eclectic.
Okay.
It's a smallish venue, but really well equipped and great for visuals as well. It's more like it's a cross between a venue, a live venue and a gallery in a way. And it's
Okay.
really
Nice.
lovely. People are great, and that's really nice. And then on the 13th of April, we're playing in Berlin at a place called Silent Green. We'll be supporting Faust, which is a pretty amazing, pretty amazing for me and well for both of
Yeah,
us because
that's
they've
cool.
been a huge influence. And then we're playing at a really great club in Hamburg on the 15th called the Golden Poodle, which is a legendary, institution there. Great place. So
Awesome.
yeah, that's our tour, our world tour. It's 4 days.
That sounds ideal, really. Well, if you ever
Yeah.
come to the U.S., you got to come to the Pacific Northwest. I would love to meet you guys in person and see you live. Um, so we're going to be
Likewise. No, I'd
closing.
love to come.
Yeah, I would love to have you in the studio. Just just do some weird patching and yeah. So we're coming up on an hour, and I do a thing for my Patreon subscribers where it's just like a little bonus portion at the end. So if you guys have some time for that, I would appreciate that. But if not, no worries. But before we
I'm
get to
okay with that.
great.
Yeah.
Before we get to that, is there anything you want to scream from the modular mountaintops to everyone listening out there?
Ooh. Don't judge.
What's that?
Don't judge your work. Don't judge your own work.
I love it. Love it. Bookending it. Full circle.
And I completely support that. And I would say use the tools you have to make the best work you can.
Love it.
There's always you always get into this kind of mindset. If only I had that module, everything would be fine. And it just doesn't really work.
That module never solves the problem that you think it's going to solve. In fact,
Exactly.
it'll offer some really cool new routes of exploration, but oftentimes it also creates more questions, than, you think it's the answer to this question, but you're going to get 4 more questions. And you see where that goes. It becomes exponential. And then you end up like me with too many modules for your experience level.
Well, I think we're all there. We're all in that position. I mean, I can't speak for all of your listeners, of course, but I certainly echo with that. It's a return on investment. And not only the new module is one. Anyway, we all love new modules, but
that's right.
I do think I want to underline what Daniel said as well. That it's not that's not the solution to not making art. We need to make art with the tools we've got today.
And sometimes it's the limitations that you're facing within your own studio or setup that can breed some of your creativity that leads to you finding your voice. That was the case for me. So, you never know what you can find in trash. All right.
Just one other little thing. One other little tip is when you've made a recording, put it away for a couple of months. Don't listen to it. Put it away, and you'll have a very different view of it than if you listen back to it too much straight after recording it. Just put it away, and and then listen to it again, and you get a really different view of what you really think of it.
Yeah, it could be at least a couple days, but usually if it's like a few months, because I've found stuff that I'm like, I don't have any recollection of making this, and I don't know how I did it. The only way I know it was me is because it's in my DAW, and no one else uses that.
Exactly.
And that happened to me the other day. I went out with my guitar because I've been doing a lot of guitar patching through my synth, and I was just improvising on this really small riff idea that I'd come up the night before. And after a few takes of it, I was like, okay, I have to play something I already know, because I thought it was trash. And so I did a couple more, and after a few days got home, listened to them. I think the one that I thought was trash is hands down the best one I did out there. And I think I might have accidentally written the whole piece right there on the spot, and I love it. But I hated it at the time. So, you know, you never know.
Exactly. Yeah.
So this is
Oh,
this.
Pity,
Yeah, that's don't judge it. I think that Daniel already mentioned that. That's a big thing for us as well. I think if we judge, certainly if I need to focus on making stuff, and stepping back from it, because if I judge it, I'm my own worst critic in a way. You know, if I'm judging it as I'm making it, I stop. You know, I stop.
Mm-hmm.
So
I
I have to negotiate with the critic.
And that could have become one of your favorite things. You know, you never know. So,
yeah.
All right. So my first Patreon bonus question, I'm kind of shooting from the hip here, but I've been asking my friends this question and people that I'm just meeting for the first time. It works for both, but I was just getting very tired of the well, what do you do for work question when having dinner parties with, you know, new friends or friends of friends? Because we like to talk about our work because we're lucky. But before I was lucky, I didn't like to talk about my work, and it didn't define who I was. So I'm going to ask you what I've been asking people. Has there been anything over the last, let's say, 6 months to a year? Like what is the thing outside of music that has excited you or piqued like the inner child, you know, like excitement, or pieces of art that have you very excited, new artists, anything like that? Like what is something that you just feel very positively strong about lately? All right, thank you so much for coming back to Podular Modcast. Thank you to Gareth and Daniel for coming on the show. Thank you for listening to the show. Also, shout out to Patchworks for their continued support of Podular Modcast. Please visit them online at patchwerks.com. Also, thank you to Forum S for their support of the show. Remember, they have the 5 new modules: the shaped dual envelope VCA, the new shuffling clock multiplier, the mini peg, and the other envelope VCA combos that are a little smaller than the shaped dual, but still very useful. Link to all of that information in the show description. Also, don't forget, you have a little bit of time to sign up for Patreon at patreon.com/Podular Modcast to put yourself into the loop about when I am going to be giving away all that cool stuff that I talked about at the beginning of the show: cassettes, patch cables, t-shirts, stickers, and a couple modules. This week's secret word is saponify, SAPONIFY. And go ahead and go look that up. And then after you look up that, look up the Lady of Crescent Lake. That's the lake that I was at for my birthday just this last weekend. And it's a spooky story. All right, until next week.